Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is David, and as ever on FPL General's orders, I am joined by the man himself, the FPL General. How you doing, Mark? It's been a bit of a tough week fantasy-wise, hasn't it? So I imagine there's a lot of us out there licking their wounds, and unfortunately, I think you're one of them, aren't you?
Yeah, rough week, David. Good to be here. Always enjoy these videos, and I feel like I need a therapy session from you this week. So I'm going to be leaning heavily on you after a 33-point game week. I'm just glad it happened in game week 2 and not in game week 37. So the high of game week one went well. I think it was like 78 points. Everything was rosy. Team was looking good. Bank the transfer. And then bang, FPL brings you back there at game week 2. So lots to chat about today and 2 free transfers. So hopefully by the end of this, I'll have a better idea of what I'm going to do with those.
Yeah, well, we mentioned before we started recording, of course, that these game weeks are often the ones where we learn the most about perhaps ourselves, about our teams, about players in the Premier League, and what to do with our transfers. And certainly there's going to be lots to talk about. And we are fully aware, of course, that there'll be lots of other people in the same boat. And so, you know, if you're wondering what to do with your 2 free transfers, if you've got them, which a lot of people probably will, you know, perhaps if you had a tough game week like Mark as well, you know, lots to have a look at, and hopefully we can help you there. And just another chat that we were having before we came on. I mean, I suppose in these game weeks, there are still positives we can take, some specifically as content creators, but perhaps also for those out there in the wider world as well. It shows, I guess, Mark, that you are not infallible. It shows that you are a human being. And if even the general can have a bad game week, then if people out there have also had a bad game week, maybe it helps them feel a little bit better.
Yeah, there's as a content creator, been playing this game for a long time. The hours you put in, the research you do, it does not guarantee success, especially not instant success in any given game week. And it's one of the most important things in FPL is how you react, or more so how you don't react to a bad game week. It's all about keeping that patience. I've been playing this game for a long time with quite a bit of a success, but I still feel the same emotions as any other manager. I'm going through the same feelings this week: despair, thinking about knee-jerk and wildcard thoughts are going through my head. But it's all about just trying to stay calm, stay away from it as much as I can. Difficult when you're a content creator, but I do stay away from the FPL website as much as I can for a couple of days. And then by Thursday, Friday, there's a clear picture. I've calmed down. The pain of game week 2 is well behind me, and I'm ready to go again for another game week. So yeah, I think this week's a good week for content. I do find myself, I listen to a lot of FPL podcasts when I'm out for walks and stuff, and I do tend to lean into them when I've had a bad game week more so than other weeks. So, and I'm sure a lot of other people out there as well are probably listening for that reason. I think when there's a lot of people are on 2 free transfers, and even those who are not are, a lot of people are probably thinking about a -4 if they've just got 1 transfer. So there's lots of content to be consumed this week, and lots of thinking to be done.
For sure. Well, in many ways, you mentioned you might need a little bit of therapy. It sounds like you've already done the therapy, and there's a very healthy attitude there of like, you've been here, you've done it before. We've all had bad game weeks before. It's a tried and tested formula. When things go wrong in any walk of life, if you've got practice in dealing with those emotions as they come in, it becomes almost like a playbook. It's like, okay, I've had a bad game week, going to calm down, not to make too many rash decisions, etc., etc. There is a step process you can go through, and hopefully there's people out there perhaps haven't experienced that before, hadn't heard that from you, and hopefully that helps them just tackle this game week with a nice clear head. So yeah, fingers crossed. And if you have had a bad game week, and any of that little chat we've had there was useful, let us know in the comments, and we'd love to continue the conversation in the comments section. I do apologise, Mark, because what I am now going to do is I am going to put your team on the screen as it was in game week 2, just to talk about some of the specifics of where it went wrong, where it went a bit better, and then we'll switch to your bus team and sort of have a broad idea of what you're thinking. Now we're to some specifics of the team.
Yeah, so for the audio listeners, the team's on the screen: 33 points. The only returns came from Estupinan with 11, and Ollie Watkins got the assist. So Captain Blank with Haaland, João Pedro was benched and got a yellow card. The 2 double-ups in midfield, what a nightmare. Manchester United and Arsenal. So Martinelli, Saka, Rashford and Bruno combined for 9 points. So I'm sure we're going to discuss those guys. Luke Shaw, started him over Gabriel because I just thought I'll play the guy who I know is going to play. And in the end, they both get 1-pointers anyway. Ben Chilwell just about makes it to 60 minutes for a 1-pointer. And I started Turner over Johnston, which was fine because they both ended up on the same point. So, I mean, going into the game week, the team on paper looked absolutely fine. Obviously, a lot has actually changed in game week 2. Ollie Watkins didn't take a penalty. Saka didn't take a penalty. João Pedro was on the bench, which I don't think too many people expected after him scoring in game week 1. So there's a lot happening here. And obviously Gabriel, I thought he would come back in and start against Crystal Palace, and he didn't. And now Arteta's saying, he's going to play a lot of games this season. Tomiyasu suspended. So, do we go a third week of thinking, do I play him, do I not? Or do I just cut ties and get out of there? So, yeah, absolutely. A good example, I think, of where you can have a very good team on paper. They score 33 points. This team next week could score 75 points, especially when you look at the fixtures. So, obviously, a couple of issues. João Pedro's a bit of a headache now. And obviously, some of the others are on the chopping block. The Manchester United guys have been very disappointing to start of the season. But, there's a lot of... I still think there's some good picks in there. Game week 1, Estupinan. I still think Chilwell's a good pick. Saka's probably fine. Bruno's probably going to stay. You've got your Haaland captaincy. But yeah, there's certainly a couple of things that I want to address. And I'm glad I've got 2 frees to do so.
Yeah, well, so what I've done is I've stuck your Game Week 3 bus team on the screen now, and of course you mentioned there that this team could well score 75 points in Game Week 3, and when you look at the fixtures that these guys are offering up, it's really nice, isn't it? Because you've got 3 guys at home against Nottingham Forest and the Man United guys, you've got 2 Arsenal attackers at home against Fulham, for example. That fixture swing for Chelsea has arrived, so you've got Chilwell at home against Luton. Estupinan seems like an auto pick against literally anybody. Haaland captaincy away at Sheffield United. There's a lot to still like about this team for Game Week 3, and I mean, I personally, it's just my opinion, but I look at this team and don't think it needs necessarily massive amounts of surgery. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, and I think that's really helping me this week not to overreact and not to panic, because when you do have a bad game week, as soon as you look at the next game week, if the fixtures are really good for a lot of your players, I'm looking at this team now, and even though I have 2 free transfers, I'm not going to say I'm definitely going to use 2 of them or even 3 transfers. I might end up just using 1 and rolling again, because to me, again, maybe when we get closer to the end of the week, but if we get strong vibes that Gabriel might actually start this week, I could just start him over João Pedro, stick João Pedro on the bench, take away that rotation headache, and stick Gabriel in the team for a 4-4-2. And then maybe my transfer is something like João Pedro down to a 4.5 to free up £1 million for the 2 free transfers in game week 4 to do a bit more of a restructure. So there's a lot going on here. But overall, there's temptation to sell Rashford for someone like an Mbeumo. There's temptation to sell a Watkins even for a Jackson or a Wissa to free up some cash. So there's lots I could do here. I could just keep it simple as well. Somehow turn the Nakamba into Mbeumo or Matoma. Go back to kind of a 3-5-2. That would probably need to be a -4. So basically, when I was going into game week 1 on the day of the deadline, or the day before the game week 1 deadline, I was on 2 drafts. I was on a 3-5-2 draft with Matoma, and I was on this kind of 3-4-3 hybrid with João Pedro. And I ended up going for Pedro. Thought he'd be on penalties, thought he'd get plenty of starts. Logical decision. Looked good in game week 1, but very quickly doesn't look so good in game week 2. So there's temptation to kind of fix that and maybe go back to the original idea of the 3-5-2. But probably means Nakamba to someone like Mbeumo, Pedro to a 4.5, and then Gabriel or Shaw, and it might have to be Shaw for budget reasons, to a 4.5 as well. Maybe a Rico Henry or something like that. Could drop down to 2-4 million defenders, but don't really want to go down that route. So there's just a couple of things that are going around my mind. So it's one of those weeks where I need a few days to figure this out. There's too much going on. There's too many routes I can go. I need to listen to content. I need to read content. I need to go back and watch a couple of more highlights. And then when it gets to Friday, hopefully I'll know what I'm doing. But certainly no rush to make decisions this week.
Yeah, that's the thing. When the choices are so plentiful, I think you definitely have to put it in a box in some ways, because, as you say, so many of those decisions could become clearer as you get towards Friday. I mean, the Gabriel one is a classic example, depending on what we get from Arteta in the next press conference, for example. And same with Pedro, to be honest, because Pedro's in my team as well. The way I'm looking at it is I think I'm going to hold Pedro this week, because I kind of feel like he's had his rest, in inverted commas. That's how I feel right now. But if, I don't know, let's say De Zerbi starts talking up Ferguson or Welbeck or something, or something happens in those press conferences that makes me think, okay, maybe he's not going to play this week, then I'll change that decision, for example. So certainly when all of the ideas are swirling, you need some focus, and sometimes the focus involves putting the decision-making in a box, I guess. So, and also, I like what you've mentioned there about maybe just doing one transfer and then banking the 2 frees for another time. Because that's also what I'm considering as well. So I'll stick my team on the screen, and I would say I'll do it with an apology because I did actually have quite a good game week. I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, David. Cheers. That always helps.
56 points. I went down the Salah captaincy route, which it worked, but it didn't work as well as it probably could have done. But I'm not going to woe is me on that because I feel bad doing that in present company. Cash came in on. I swapped Cash in from my bench. My plan was always to bring a Villa defender in for game week 2 because I liked it and that paid off. I was quite happy with that. I did make for me though with the Turner decision that did go wrong in inverted commas because I did bench Flecken. But that tells me, and we're going to talk about Brentford in a bit. But I think Brentford all up and down the team look good. And so that mistake has taught me, right, okay, I think I need to start Flecken most weeks, to be honest. Not much else to write home about in the team, but just for the benefit of the podcast listeners, Turner, Cash, Estupiñán, Chilwell, Rashford, and Burmo, Diaby, Salah, Captain, Saka, Pedro, and Haaland. 56 points. And so what I'm looking at doing for game week 3, I'm sort of in a similar boat to you in the sense that I've got to deal with Pedro, I've got to deal with Gabriel. For me, that's about it, to be honest. My changes would simply involve just swapping the goalkeeper back over. I want to start Cash against Burnley still. Estupiñán against West Ham. Chilwell against Luton, I'm quite happy with. Oh, Rashford, that's the other one. So it's Rashford, Pedro, and Gabriel. And I kind of feel like at home against Nottingham Forest, maybe Rashford gets something. I think Pedro may have had his rest now, so he may come back in against West Ham. So I'm not necessarily in an immediate rush to sell either of those two. Gabriel might depend on the price changes. If I start to see that everybody's starting to panic on him, maybe I'll move him on. But he's on my bench right now, so the only reason I would sell him would be to make sure I just don't lose that 0.1. Could maybe get Henry so that I've got my Brentford triple up. Because, when Brentford keep a clean sheet, if I got Flecken and Henry does look very nice, maybe that's going to work for me. So they're kind of the options I'm considering. But bearing in mind, I don't feel in an immediate rush to sell anybody in my starting 11. And I'm only thinking about maybe moving on someone on my bench. It makes me feel like I don't want to use my 2 free transfers this week. I could do Rashford to Maddison, no problem. I could do Rashford to Maddison, and I probably, if I wanted to, do Pedro up to Jackson if I did that. And then fully lean into that fixture swing. But then part of me thinks, well, I've got Chilwell already, and I think he's attacking enough in this Chelsea team. Maddison does look good, but actually spending the 2 free transfers when we've got more data is maybe worth, rather than necessarily spend it now just for the sake of it. Spending those 2 free transfers when we've had more opportunities to watch all of the teams arguably is probably just objectively better. So I feel like that could be useful as well. So it was affirming to me that you're also feeling the same way. You might just make 1 transfer and do that mini wildcard later on, not in game week 3.
Yeah, it's, going into the season, I always try and have 2 frees by the time I get to game week 3. And the reason is, maybe I'll need some major surgery by game week 3. Yes, it was a shocking game week, but is the team an absolute mess? No. So I do want to keep the option open of just 1 transfer because I think it would be silly not to. So this week I could make anything from 1 to 3 transfers. It could be just 1 and roll or make the 2 frees, or maybe I will do a restructure. And if it is a restructure for maybe Bumo for Nakamba, or Matoma or someone like that, or Solly March, then it probably is a -4. But then it also feels like I'm just taking a -4, making 3 moves for 1 player almost in midfield, which doesn't feel fantastic. So I probably won't end up going down the -4 route.
Yeah, it seems a bit too early, I think, to be taking hits. I can think of times in the past where my mini wildcard in Game Week 3 has backfired. Now, sometimes it has worked, but I think the one that stung the most was, I think it was about 5 years ago, where it was that year where Vardy did really, really well when he was like a 9 million forward. And I was really, really convinced about him at the start of the season. I was talking him up loads. I got him in all the draft leagues I played, and I overpaid to have him, and everyone thought I was crazy. I had 2 game weeks. He had 1 shot in those first 2 games. So I mini wildcarded him out in game week 3, and I think he scored 2 goals and got an assist. And within 3 or 4 or 5 game weeks, I got him. I had to get him back because I'm pretty sure within 3 or 4 or 5 game weeks he'd scored a hat-trick in the 9-0 win over Southampton, and then he just became, for want of a better word, essential. And so there can be players who even statistically underperform as well as eye test underperform in the first 2, and so that's why I wonder, could Rashford be like that? could Pedro be like that? So spending a -4 after just 2 game weeks, whilst I've obviously talked up the benefits of it loads on a lot of the content I've done, if it's to get rid of players who I feel like could still deliver, or if it's -4s to maybe just leverage, as you say, just the improvement of one player, maybe it's not as worth it, because with these -4s, they have to be situational. So that's at the back of my mind, like the errors of the past. It's like, could any of these guys just have started slow, and then they might be banging the goals in 3 or 4 game weeks time?
Yeah, again, just patience. Like you say, when I think about it, do I want to make 3 moves for a -4 to get an Mbumo who I feel like I've missed out on, or do I just play more sensibly? We can't really be making any decisions, well informed decisions yet when we've only had 2 game weeks of eye test and information. Yes, you look at the transfer section of the FPL website, you see players like March, Mbumo, Mitoma, Luis Diaz, Jota, they're all showing up very well, but every season we see players show up at the top of the scoring charts in the first couple of game weeks, and they quickly can trickle back down that list when the big guys do start performing. So I've still got faith in Bruno. Rashford maybe not as much, but if he did move to left wing soon, I would have more faith. And kind of something that's floating around my head as well with Rashford is I think it was he 6'5" last season, 6.5 million.
Yeah, that's right.
I think, are we still treating him like that 6.5 player? Because if he is 9 million and he's not delivering, and he certainly hasn't looked great. Yes, the underlyings are not too bad from the first 2 game weeks, but I think most United fans, we're not too keen him up front as a striker, and I think we'll see the best from when he is back on the left wing. But I'm quite open to the idea of jumping off Rashford, even if it's Nottingham Forest at home, because I think if he's underperforming, I think if the team's underperforming, if there's a lot of cash tied up in that position, Rashford could be a cash cow. I've still got Bruno, still got Shaw, and could always go back to Rashford later. So I'm looking at price points in my team. I'm looking at Rashford at 9. I'm looking at Watkins at 8. If I'm going to free up cash for other moves, those are probably the 2 price points I'm looking at. So yeah, I'm certainly open to losing Rashford, even though it's a good fixture this week.
Yeah, he's very much. Yeah, I don't know. He could go either way for me.
Yeah, and I should mention Martinelli in the same sentence, because again, 8 million could be a bit of a cash cow. I watched the game against Palace. He was pretty wide for a lot of it. I don't think he links up very well with Nketiah. They get in each other's way sometimes. I much prefer Martinelli when Jesus is in the team. And he did have a couple of opportunities. There was one point early on, he was in the box, a lot of space, a lot of time. Just shot was blocked in the end, I think. Had a volley in the box which went wide. So yeah, just Martinelli's played a little bit wide for my liking, so I'm not going to rule out selling him either. Yeah, it's tricky because Martinelli, Rashford, Watkins, they all have good fixtures. We know they're all good players. They just haven't started, like a house on fire. So it's a very difficult balancing act. I think, which players do you give more time, and which ones do you actually let go? It's certainly not easy decisions this week.
Yeah, that's true. Well, in some respects, sometimes the decisions are easy, sometimes the decisions are hard. I feel like the harder decisions always stick in my mind, so it makes me feel like this is a difficult game. And some weeks it is. So people have come to the right place, because of course we do also have some orders for you to give people as well, which we shouldn't forget, because that is of course the title of the show. So let's move on to those now and head to the first order, which we've kind of already discussed. But give it to us straight, Mark. What's order number 1?
Yeah, order number 1 is stay calm if you've had a bad game week. And this goes, across the season. Remember this, even if you had a good game week this week, you will have bad game weeks at certain points. Everyone has bad game weeks. They're part of the game, and how you deal with them is the most important thing. If you want to have a successful season, if you want to win your mini league, or if you want to finish with a good overall rank at the end of the season, you need to deal with bad game weeks well. And the best way to deal with them, first of all, is don't make early transfers. Don't panic. It takes a wee while to process a bad game week. It's very easy to go on tilt, which I think is a poker term. You go chasing, or you go making bad decisions because you're in a negative mindset after bad outcomes. You might have had a good team on paper, but you had a bad outcome. Always remember, evaluate the process before the game week, not afterwards. I went back and looked at my team, that I posted on Twitter. Game week 2, trips for game week 2. Team looked great before a ball was kicked. Bad outcome. Not going to panic. The same team, like I said, could do well game week 3. So, yeah, I always say FPL, we manage our teams, but I think it's more important how you manage yourself. And if you can be patient, if you can sit in your hands and not make early transfers, not panic, don't just go and buy all the guys who have the most points on the FPL website, because they won't be at the top all season. And again, the main thing is just give yourself a couple of days. If you're thinking about making a couple of early transfers, don't worry too much about the price changes, especially if you can still afford them on Thursday or Friday. And if you get to Thursday or Friday and you still want to get those players, absolutely fine. It's like anything. A good tip I picked up in life was if you're in a shop, or you see a pair of trainers, they're 100 quid and you want to buy them, give yourself 24 hours and ask yourself again, do you still want to buy them? So it kind of applies to FPL as well. If you're thinking about Sunday night, Monday night, looking at a couple of transfers, maybe -4, give yourself 24 hours and ask yourself the question again after that, because very often the answer will be no. You'll be in a better mindset and you'll be calmer, and you'll maybe wait till later in the week. So yeah, stay calm after a bad game week. We will all have them. I could go out in game week 3 again and have a bad game week. Does that mean I'm going to wildcard game week 4? No. I'm going to stay calm, trust the process, trust the players, trust the fixtures, and just, again, small improvements in the team rather than, rash surgery when it's not needed.
Yeah. Now, that analogy of being in a shop and having impulse is sort of like foisted upon you, in the sense that they want you to impulse buy things. And when you walk through the till in any shop, and it's like they have bits and bobs just laid out. In many ways, that's like going on the FPL website and seeing who everybody else is signing, or perhaps maybe monitoring the price changes and things like that. And so really, I feel like what is the crux of the process that you're going through as a person when you're in that scenario, when you're in FPL or just any other life scenarios, is effectively the fear of missing out. I might miss out on getting a good deal on that. I might miss out on having nice trainers, and everyone's going to think that I'm a slob because I've got the cheap trainers or whatever. I'm sure most adults don't really think like that, but effectively that's what marketers want to do to people. They want to make you feel like you're missing out if you don't make this purchase. And I'm not saying that FPL is trying to make you feel that way or anything like that, but the culture that ends up happening when you see other people's teams and you see the points that they've scored in any given game week, you see the players that they're buying, the players that are scoring goals, what can trigger those rash decisions effectively is the fear of missing out. And yeah, I mean, I just wondered if you had any specific things that you do, sort of actionable things you do in your day if you're sort of in scenarios when you can see, I'd love to have that player, for example, that help, I guess, mitigate against the fear of missing out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's always reminding myself that those points are gone. You can look at, I've got feelings this week that I should have went Bumo game week 1. Want to get Bumo as soon as possible. He's top of the scoring charts. I'm an idiot. Why is he not my team? Just go and buy him Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But again, the points are gone. When I buy him, I'm not getting the 24 or so points that he already has. I'm, starting on 0 again, like everyone else in game week 3 with Bumo. And I think it's Crystal Palace next, who I thought were quite good defensively against Arsenal, just conceding once. So it's, I've got Johnston as well, which is a bit conflicting. If I do want to buy Bumo this week, or Wissa, or those guys, it's up against my goalkeeper. So yeah, it's just, again, it's, if you're feeling impulsive, and I think you mentioned the price changes, that's something I try to avoid as much as possible, because that can make you feel, weak as an FPL manager. You might have a moment of weakness, at midnight or 1 a.m. before the prices change. I think they change about 2:30 in the morning UK time. You might be, I remember Ross, FPL Raptor, his great book he put together. I think it mentioned, time of day is important when you're making your transfers. You don't make your best decisions at night time when you're tired. So always remember that as well. Maybe wait till the morning when you have a fresher head. You can be a bit impulsive, maybe late at night. And if you're on those FPL websites, price prediction websites, and you see a player, like if Gabriel's about to drop, you might be like, oh, maybe do I save myself 0.1 here? Do I get Rico Henry? But you can do that. And then you could do that on Monday, Tuesday, and then come Thursday, one of your other players is injured, or Rico Henry's injured, or there's a postponement that we didn't see coming, and then you're forced into a -4. So yeah, always comes back to patience for me. And just, I think to avoid impulsive decisions is maybe avoid the websites, avoid the FPL website, avoid the app, and avoid the price change websites. I'm a content creator, FPL content creator, but I spend very little time on the FPL website, because dangerous things can happen if you spend too much time there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's all about controlling the controllables, I've found, in terms of like FOMO just in life in general. And then there is, of course, just as we've said multiple times, this blend across into FPL. And it's like, think about what you can actually affect as a person in the time frame that you've got. You know, if you've got a problem that has landed on your doorstep, be that you don't own this player or, you know, something else that's happened in your life, and you have the opportunity to respond immediately without having planned anything. You know, you haven't gone, what if I do it this way, if I do it that way? What you can control in that scenario is how you respond and how you make your decision-making process. And sometimes just taking that problem and locking it in a box and just putting it somewhere else, doing something else, finding something else to do. I mean, to be fair, that could be listening to content as well, because especially in a week like this, there's going to be a lot of managers like yourself who perhaps are in the same mindset. So hopefully that encourages you to put those things in a box. But find ways to put the problem in a box. Almost like imagine it in your head like it is a box, and you just put the lid on and you put it on an imaginary shelf behind you, and then you go off and do something else that you take enjoyment from, that gives you fulfillment. And whilst you're doing those things that give you enjoyment and give you fulfillment, you can be working over what your plan is. And so then that's like that 24-hour period you talked about of like, do I really need these trainers? You know, and for example, just with my team this week, when I saw Pedro and Rashford's blanks, I was like, okay, well, I'll probably sell them. But then I just put that problem in a little box, left it, and then when I came back to thinking about that again this morning, I'm like, I realised over that sort of time period that Pedro maybe starts this week against West Ham. That's probably pretty good. Yeah. Home against Nottingham Forest, not a bad fixture, you know. And so my decision-making process has changed, and I've thought about all of the alternatives. And all of those alternatives that I'm thinking about, they are controllables I can control. The price changes, I can't control those, so there's no point responding based on something I can't control. And the thing is, the problem isn't going to change. Like you can make it if you make a decision on Monday impulsively. Well, if you made the decision on Friday, nothing's actually changed in that time. You know, and telling yourself it's okay. I don't need to make this decision now. I don't need to respond to the external negative stimuli right now. And
I've got a similar. Sorry to cut across you. Carry on.
No, I was just saying that right there is hard to learn, but once you've learned it and you get into that rhythm, it comes as second nature, and it really, really helps with FPL as well.
Yeah, I have a similar example. You were mentioning there, you know, you've seen the Pedro and Rashford blanks, and initial reaction, right? I'm probably going to sell those guys. When I seen the Arsenal team sheet on Monday, I had Gabriel on my bench anyway, so I was kind of happy enough to see him on the bench. But as soon as I seen him on the bench, I just impulsively tweeted "Goodbye, Gabriel" with a little waving emoji. But then when I give it's 24 hours later now, maybe not even 24 hours later, I'm thinking I might not sell Gabriel because maybe he'll play. Maybe I've got other issues I need to deal with. Maybe I'll just leave him on my bench. So there's a good example again of impulsive FPL behavior. I initially thought, right, 100%, I'm selling him this week. But when it gets to Friday, it'll be a case of, do I sell him or do I not sell him? So, you know, a good example of how your thought process changes, especially when you're in the heat of the moment of an FPL, you know, something happening like a player missing a penalty or a player getting benched, you know, straight away. You know, Pedro's a good example. I'm selling this guy. He's a rotation risk. But listening to David today, well, maybe he's had his rest. Maybe he'll play. Maybe he could actually do really well in game week 3. And if he doesn't, is it going to hurt me massively to wait until game week 4 to sell him instead of game week 3? You know, possibly not. So you've got to weigh all this up. And that's why I like a normal FPL season where there's, you know, 5 or 6 days between decisions, because when there's midweek fixtures, you don't have as much time to process it. And I'm a manager who always found that I do need the best part of a week to come to my decisions. I wouldn't like to have to rush it after a day or two.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. We don't want to jinx it too soon, but fingers crossed we've got ourselves a normal season this season. The omens look good at the moment, and we'll lean into that. But yeah, thank you very much for order number 1. As hopefully that was useful for people. And yeah, if you want to continue discussions about that sort of thing in the comment section, then fire away. And I think a lot of this stuff applies to just daily life as well as FPL, which is nice and is hopefully helpful for people. To something a little bit more silly now. We move on to the Dad's Army section of General's Orders, which is going to be slightly shorter this week. I haven't unfortunately had the time to tweet and ask for other people to send their teams in. But I actually just wanted to give a shout out to my dad again, who had an awful game week in game week 1, but actually went really bold in game week 2 and actually ended up having a decent score, which seems odd to me, to be honest, when we look at this team. So what he did was he took a -8. So there we go. That's exciting in game week 2 because he's just full in on the impulsiveness. But he owns it. He's like, that's just what I'm going to do. But I can't tell you what his transfers were because I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. But just to run through the team: Ramsdale in goal, White, Dunk, Zuma, Barnes, Mitoma, Bowen, Saka, Diaz, as in Luis Diaz, Alvarez, Captain Haaland. So we got 52 points. Take off the 8. It's not, an incredibly groundbreaking score, but just in terms of forget the score, forget the hits. To have a team with Mitoma, Diaz, and Alvarez, I just want to give him a little bit of an applause because in a game where a lot of people did really badly, it's nice to see some differentials coming off. And this looks like the team again, as ever, that beats you in the FPL Cup.
Yeah, I haven't met your dad yet, David, and I hate him already. So chances are we might not meet. He takes a -8, and he still beats my measly 33. So yeah, well done, David's dad.
Yeah, love the obvious sarcasm there. I'll get it off the screen. Because it's probably upsetting people in the chat as well.
It's hurting my eyes.
Well, let's take us to order number 2. And speaking of hurting people's eyes, unfortunately, I do have Brentford's alternative kit on the screen, which does look like a television screen in the 90s when you've lost reception. But yes, we're going to talk about Brentford briefly. Order number 2 is about the bees.
Yeah, order number 2 this week is don't overlook the Brentford boys. So I'm seeing a lot of people this week weighing up. Do I go Jackson at Chelsea for the fixtures, or do I go Alvarez as a differential in the Manchester City attack? But I think Wissa should be in the conversation. He's been brilliant in the first 2 game weeks. He's on 20 FPL points already, scored in both games, picked up an assist, bonus points in both games, 5 bonus points in total. And Brentford have good fixtures as well. Crystal Palace at home and Bournemouth at home in the next 2. So 2 nice home fixtures, a team that are already playing quite well. So yeah, it's basically, I said don't overlook the Brentford boys. This is geared towards Wissa. Make sure he's in your, when you are considering players like Jackson and Alvarez, or if you're weighing up whether to sell Watkins, Wissa should be absolutely in the conversation because he started the season really well. And he could be an absolute gem this season at 6.1 million. Well done if you're on him in game week 1 because you probably had a good start to the season. Mbeumo we've talked about a few times, and I guess when I'm saying don't overlook the Brentford guys, when it comes to Mbeumo, don't feel like you've missed the boat or don't feel like you've missed the party. I always think it's better to join a party late than never go to the party at all. You'll still probably get some points. So yeah, Mbeumo, don't be stubborn if you're like me and you thought you didn't. He was never really going to be in my game week 1 team, so I don't feel too bad about this one. I don't have too many regrets because he wasn't in too many drafts. I was quite determined not to go there because I felt like it wasn't my kind of pick. It was going to be influenced by others if I went for Mbeumo. But I'm not going to be stubborn now just because of that. His performance have been good. His underlines are good. He's taken penalties. Brentford have started the season well. Don't be afraid to go there if you don't have him already. And again, just on Brentford, you mentioned him earlier, Rico Henry, really good pick. I think he's right up there as one of the best 4.5, 4.6 defenders. And Flecken, who you've also got, is a very good option. Pickford owners are probably getting a bit twitchy, back-to-back 1-pointers. I would probably recommend giving Pickford another 2 games. I think the fixtures are okay. The next 2, it might be Wolves and Sheffield United off the top of my head. Maybe you sell Pickford game week 5 if he's still not performing. But Flecken certainly looks like a place you could go if you really do want to sell Pickford this week and you don't have a backup option. So Brentford's just a good team, good players, good FPL picks, good fixtures. Don't ignore them when you're looking at other options this week.
Well, it's very, very difficult to ignore them if you do have a look at some of the underlying numbers from the first 2 games, which, as we've said, we don't want to read too much into the first 2 because, every additional game week we get, we become more informed and players can regress. But so far, it is looking very, very exciting. So no player in the Premier League has a high expected goal involvement so far this season than Mbeumo. Of course, there are penalties involved in that, but his non-penalty XGI is also super high. I can't tell you off the top of my head where that ranks ranks, but it's good. Like, he is a very persistent attacker. So he's had 6 shots in the box, which is joint fifth. So he's in the top 5 for shots in the box so far amongst all players. 4 big chances, which is more than anybody else. 5 shots on target for Mbeumo. Only Solly March has had more. Then in terms of Visser, he's had 9 shots in the box, and the only player to have more than him so far, of course, is could have been the star of Sunny Soldiers, Odsonne Edouard. He's top of the league for shots in the box. So Visser's had more shots in the box so far than Haaland. He's had 2 big chances, 5 on target. Both of those are ahead of Haaland. Only March has more shots on target than Visser so far. Among all forwards, Visser is top for expected goal involvement as well. The stats are really, really good. And so if you're the sort of person who is going to have a look at some of these stats tables, you can't ignore them. They're right there, and I'm a bit frustrated with myself because I did have Visser at points in the preseason, but for me it was Mbeumo or Visser.
Yeah,
but actually you could make a case for having both. But of course, I think you want to cover their defense as well. So I don't think it necessarily disadvantages me too much to only have one of them. But wow, like the numbers they're posting so far are really, really good. Fulham, maybe that's to be expected, but they also played Spurs and their numbers were good against them as well. So across what you have to say is a difficult fixture because it's a so-called Big Six team, and then a team that last season obviously did overperform and did quite well. Like Fulham are no mugs, pretty good, and the fixtures keep on being good. So if you turn around and go, oh well, they've had kind fixtures, or if you think Spurs is an easy fixture, it doesn't matter. The fixtures still look really, really good. So yeah, I agree. Brentford are looking really, really good as well. And I suppose when you compare with Jackson, for example. I'll just do a quick comparison between Visser and Jackson. As I said, Visser was doing very, very well anyway, but Visser's had 9 shots in the box to Jackson's 6. He's had 5 shots on target to Jackson's 2. Expected goal involvement for Visser is 1.78. For Jackson, it's 1.39. But the thing with Visser is he's had a 20% goal conversion, which is largely in line with what you would say is sustainable. When someone's offering like 50% goal conversion, that's going to come down at some point. Visser is having lots of shots, and his goal conversion is 20%. That's pretty standard. Like, that's good. That's a sustainable, reasonable output. Jackson, 0%. Still hasn't found a goal yet. New to the Premier League. And so, yes, this is the fixture swing for Chelsea. Maybe he delivers something. But going back to control the controllables, well, in terms of controllables and things that Visser can cut it in the Premier League because he's already done it and he's currently still doing it. And so there could be a strong case to be made that you do go Visser over Jackson when you sort of look at some of those numbers. So, because all the talk has been about Chelsea, hasn't it? As you say, that's been what people have been thinking about, and Brentford could get slept on in some of those conversations.
Yeah, it's the old form versus fixtures when it comes to Wissa versus Jackson this week. If the deadline was in 5 minutes' time, and if I was looking for a new striker, if I was selling Pedro or Watkins, I think I'd be on Wissa over Jackson. Probably over Alvarez as well, just still slight rotation concerns there, although I don't think they're as bad as they were maybe going into the season. But yeah, Wes is my kind of pick. Safe, proven, performing well, playing for a team not in transition, whereas Chelsea are a team in transition, and Jackson is adjusting to the league, so it's a very tricky one. Do you play the fixtures with Chelsea, or do you play the form pick in Wissa? And for me, Wissa probably just about shades it at the moment. And I do like the 1 million cash saving that you can do something else elsewhere. So, but again, it probably depends on if I go Bumo, because I still think it's probably Bumo or Wissa rather than both. Do I want to double Brentford attack? Yes, they've been good, but I don't think I want to overinvest there. I've already been stung by double United attack and double Arsenal attack. I don't want to get stung by double Brentford attack, stung by the bees. So yeah, it's depending on what I do with the midfield position, but certainly Wissa and Bumo, two really good FPL picks.
Yeah, and I suppose probably just one last thing to say on Brentford in terms of on that subject of, do you get both? To temper them somewhat in the long term. The fixtures obviously are still pretty good in the next 4. So yeah, Palace, Bournemouth, Everton, all at home. Then Newcastle away, which obviously is a tricky one, but then Forest away, game week 7. Between game week 8 and 13, they face United, Chelsea, Liverpool all the way, and then Arsenal at home. So that's 4 of that 6 period are all red on the season ticker against so-called big teams. We have to say so-called these days because I do think the term Big Six is in flux at the moment, but I think people understand what I mean when I say that. West Ham at home as well in Game Week 11. London derby. West Ham actually did look quite good against Chelsea, for example. So that run, I think I would only want to have one for. So doubling up now would maybe set me up for having to remove one of them at that point, for example. So, Brentford do look really, really good, but maybe worth people just having a plan for that run between game weeks 8 and 13, probably. So, yeah, it's always good to look ahead. Let's move on to order number 3 then, which we did promise some Man United chat, and what we've got on the screen right now is Bruno Fernandes looking largely disappointed in the Spurs stadium. Spurs players and fans are usually the ones who look disappointed in that venue, but no longer. It was the Portuguese this weekend.
Yeah, order number 3 this week is to give Bruno Fernandes one more week against Forest. I feel like I have deja vu from this point of last season. I had triple Liverpool, and it was a disaster. And I've had triple Manchester United for the first 2 game weeks, and it's also been a disaster. So I've been here before, which does help me cope with it and give me hope that everything will be fine in the end. It's August, come back to me in May, and everything will be fine, hopefully. But there's a lot of chatter about, maybe selling Bruno, selling Rashford. I think with Bruno, in Bruno's case, he's cheaper than Rashford. He's got the penalties. So if you have both of them, and you really want to sell one, I would probably sell Rashford to free up the extra cash and keep the penalty taker. Bruno's underlying numbers are better as well. Just in game week 2, Bruno, 4 chances created. 2 of them were big chances, 6 goal attempts with 3 shots in the box. So it was a pretty good performance from Bruno in game week 2, which gives me hope that he can deliver in game week 3. So I've got Bruno and Rashford. I may end up keeping both of them. If I sell one, it's going to be Rashford. So order number 3, keep Bruno. Underlying numbers are good. The fixture's good. He's got penalties. Give him another week. And then if he blanks again, of course, then we probably need to look at selling him. But yeah, fingers crossed Bruno can go big in game week 3.
Yeah, I think he's got every chance of doing it. He's underperforming his XGI at the moment, and when you consider the quality of the player that he is, that is not normal, and you would expect it to regress to the norm eventually. Interestingly enough, I talked about Mbeumo being top of the league for expected goal involvement. Well, second after 2 games is Bruno, and he obviously doesn't have anything yet. With that situation, it's 7 chances created, 2 big chances created, 3 shots in the box, as you've mentioned already, 1 big chance and 1 shot on target. So it's interesting because the actual raw numbers offensively don't look incredible, but I think it's just the quality of the chances he's made so far all just pulls together for that expected goal involvement. It does look very good. So that is going to revert to the norm eventually. And at home against Forest, you wouldn't be shocked if it was that moment that he just got over the line and started performing against his XGI. But we also know he can overperform it because, he's the sort of player who can fashion chances out of nothing and therefore, get assists from low XA. We know that he can have a shot from distance and it go in top bin, so he can get goals from low XG. So that may happen in this game. And that's what resets his XGI underperformance, for example. So if you're not expecting a player of his quality to revert to his XGI baseline at home against a team that was the worst team away from home last season, I don't know. Like that seems like you're asking. You're sort of almost trying to convince yourself that Fernandes is less of a good player than he used to be. That he's somehow dropped off for good now. But I don't think anyone really thinks that. So if you think he's a good player. And by the way, this is just because the stats are good. If the stats were terrible, then I would be perfectly happy for people to say I think he's finished, especially at home against Forest. I don't trust him with it. But it's just the fact that the numbers in those games have been good, and these are the sorts of things that I hadn't even noticed that. The United games I've watched, I haven't necessarily come away and gone, oh, he's about to bang necessarily. But when I look at the numbers, I'm like, I must have missed something here, or maybe I was, had my mind on other things while I was watching the game, perhaps. And it just helps remind me to keep him in my thoughts because I do place a lot of trust in a lot of these numbers. Not everybody does, but I have not gone too far wrong in looking at some of these numbers and sort of allowing them to influence my decisions. So, if I had Bruno, I'd be holding him like easy.
Yeah, fingers crossed that patience will be rewarded. Because again, it's a good example. I think if you're a new player to FPL this season, if you're going in to make a game week 3 transfer, you'll just look at the points on the website and you'll think, I've got Bruno, he's done nothing. I don't have Mbeumo or Matoma. I'll just make the switch, which is dangerous. Don't just look at FPL points, look at the underlying numbers as well. And obviously, Scout Members area is a good place to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, if you haven't signed up already, then do make sure you do that, because it's these sorts of things that make all the difference, especially when you're making lots of transfers. I mean, Matoma, nice little comparison there. His XGI Fernandez over the first two is about 0.3 higher than Matoma. So, it's you're not really. If you were to make that switch, you could argue that's a switch that isn't necessarily improving your team as much as you think it is, because you're actually shifting to a player who in the first two games should have actually scored fewer points than Bruno. Or you could argue that 0.3 is much of a muchness. You're switching one good player for another good player. Well, why? Something I learned from Joe a long time ago was that, again, it comes back to FOMO. It's like, okay, fine, everybody's got that guy. I don't have him, right? But what do I have? I might have something that still offers something good. And if you've got a guy who's got a good fixture and he's the one who has to leave your team to get someone else, is that a good investment of your resources? Your resources here being a transfer, because we only have a limited number of free ones. And so, that transfer, I certainly wouldn't be making it this week. It's hard, because when you go on the website, you're standing in the queue and, you've got all these, you can save money on this one, but you have to give me this. Just remember what you've got might be as good as what you don't have.
That's a good tip. I always just, I'll get people send me messages panicking, do I switch Bruno to Bumo? Do I switch Rashford to Matoma, Solly March? And it's always a case of, trust your troops as well. You've got probably a pretty decent 11 that you can get on the pitch. And, a shiny new toy is always going to be attractive. We're always going to want what we don't have. But very often when you get something you don't have, it's disappointment. And, in the case of Mbumo, he's a fantastic pick, but he's on course to score 38 penalties this season, which is not going to happen. So, keep all that in mind. I just want to be clear, Mbumo is a good pick, and don't not get him just because I've said that. But I'm just a better non-owner.
Well, no, I think, but the main thing is everyone's team is different. This is the thing. It's like, fine, you don't have that guy, but if you have to sacrifice something that is good to get to that, then it's not necessarily always a good transfer. I think sometimes when we get questions come in, I think some people expect that the answer is very binary. It's a yes, no. Do I need this player? And it's like, well, I guess, but if the rest of your midfield can still perform, a free transfer is more valuable to your team than owning that guy this week. And I think it's encouraging people to think of it that way, rather than like, this is the guy you have to have this week. Because if we start saying that, then we as content creators become as guilty of creating FOMO in other people, if that makes sense. So that's just how I see it. So
again, this week's a good example of that kind of FOMO stuff, and looking at what you have and what your team can do. I don't have Bumo, I don't have March, I don't have Matoma. But when I look at my midfield four, it's 2 Man United guys against Forest and it's 2 Arsenal guys against Fulham. Why would I really sell those guys if you're a fixtures manager, which I am a fixtures manager? Yes, it would be easier maybe if my João Pedro was a 5th midfielder, which is on my mind, but certainly very difficult to sell an Arsenal or a Manchester United midfielder for a Brighton or a Brentford guy when they've got good fixtures.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good place for us to end, I think, on this sort of positive note of like defiance that no, look, we've got good teams and we're gonna roll with it and we're gonna make some sensible, sound decisions. So thanks very much as ever, Mark, for giving us those orders and sharing your experience this week, especially as it's been a tough one. We do appreciate you coming out and talking about it.
Thank you for the therapy session. I do feel lighter after this video.
Yeah, that's good. Well, if anybody else needs some FPL therapy, then you're welcome to join us on an episode of General's Orders and we'll sort you out. Of course, there's plenty of other content this week as well, which might ease your pain. We'll have Goals Imminent was on earlier today with Joe and Tom, so go check that out if you haven't already. We'll have some team reveals on the channel. We've got Deadline Dilemmas on Thursday. We have Q&A on Friday, team news video as well, which will be important this week with a few injuries still flying around, and there'll be a deadline stream as well. And of course, over the weekend, there'll be plenty of content to enjoy as and when the action is happening in the Premier League. But with that, we shall leave you fine folks to perhaps not tinker with your teams this time, but just to think about how you can put that tinkering off until Friday. So with that, we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.